Oliver. But unfortunately, things come into play, and Chase will not be joining us this week. To put this in football terms, I don't know. It's a unforced bye. No, that's not. I'm thinking unforced error and bye week at the same time. But he is a coach's decision. We'll call it that. A coach's decision. His work is picking up here in the holiday season, and he will be unable to join us. But I am here. I do have his picks, so we will be going through everything here. We want to thank you once again for tuning in. We want to thank you for being subscribed. We want to thank you for joining us. This is the 10th episode of this show. When we first did it, we just kind of wanted to pick for the week. We weren't sure if it was going to be a continual thing, but here we are, the 10th show. We started in, I think it was week 3 or maybe it has been week 3. And here we are picking week 14. So let's get into it. And first, as always, let's see how we did last week. So Chase was 12-4. I was 13-3. We're picking up. We're getting more and more accurate as the season goes on. We had a little bit of a dip there in weeks 10 and 11, but bouncing back strong in week 13. Hopefully week 14 will continue in that same vein. So let's talk about the slate of games that we have to pick. Now, because of when I was able to record and Chase's schedule, we were unable to pick yesterday's Thursday evening's game. However, he did when he sent me the list of his picks, he had picked the Lions. I would have picked the Lions, but we're not going to count that for the purposes of making the determination of our selections for this week. So let's start with Buccaneers and Raiders. And thankfully Chase gave me like a little bit of an explanation as to why he was making each selection. And so I'm going to read through what he's written. And for Raiders Bucks, he has put down, it's crazy to choose them here over the Buccaneers. This Buccaneers team just plays down to the level of their competition. I can see the Raiders pulling off a nice upset. Now, Aiden O'Connell has not looked terrible. He's not looked kind of what a really good pro quarterback should look like, but he hasn't looked terrible at all. But the thing that works really in the Raiders' advantage is that they have Brock Bowers. And as long as you have Brock Bowers, you kind of have a fighting chance. He's leading the league in receptions. It may not be, I don't think Detroit and the Packers would have changed anything like that. The majority of the Packers offense really was Christian Watson last night, and Christian Watson hadn't really had that many catches beforehand. And on the Lions side, there was some peppering to Jameson Williams and to Tim Patrick, who I now definitely miss in Denver. I wish he didn't have to be a cap casualty, but with them trying to move forward from the Russell Wilson contract, they had to try to get as lean and mean as possible. And unfortunately, that meant that Tim's contract was on the chopping block. But Brock Bowers is still the leader in receptions for the league. And it's crazy because even though they trade away Devontae Adams, he doesn't really see that much of a downtick in targets and receptions. And Devontae was still getting his to a decent degree when he was with the Raiders this year. So it's crazy because defenses know that really all they have to key in on is Brock Bowers. Yes, there's Jacoby Myers, and Amir Abdullah has kind of stepped up a bit. Trey Tucker is there, sure, but really it's Bowers. And the fact that they're able to still get Bowers the ball, get him into space, and he's able to make those catches, it's a real testament to his ability. That being said, I can understand Chase's argument of the Buccaneers playing down to their competition, but for the Buccaneers, for where they are in the division and where they need to be in order to get into the playoffs, this kind of is a must win. They really do need to win out in order to ensure that they're in the playoffs. It's tough sledding for them, but between Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, they've got the firepower. And a concern for me definitely is that Bucky Irving seems as though he may be a game time decision. But I think I'm going to take the Buccaneers simply because I trust Baker Mayfield more than I trust Aiden O'Connell when the chips are down. I trust him to be able to make the play, and I trust that Mike Evans is going to be there to make that catch for him. Moving onwards from a conference versus conference to an in-division matchup, this is going to be one where I'm sure we're going to see some highlights from Hard Knocks. We just had the snow game. Coming back from that snow game, a week in between, the Steelers picked up the win over the Bengals. The Browns fell to the Broncos. Now they meet each other again, this time in Pittsburgh versus in Cleveland. So there's some home field advantage for the Steelers. And Chase is picking the Steelers with the simple sentence of just the better team than the Browns. And, I can't argue with that one. I really can't. I am fascinated, though, particularly because I was watching, obviously, that Monday night game closely, being a Broncos fan. I am intrigued, and I want to know more as to why the Browns went away from Nick Chubb. It didn't seem as though Chubb had an injury, but they really just, I don't know if it was they what the issue was there, whether they just liked Jerome Ford more, which seems weird because there was still clearly times in the game where you needed that bruising power of Nick Chubb. They had to throw a lot more than I think they wanted to, which is weird when you're going up against a Denver defense that's very good against the pass. It's very good against the run too, don't get me wrong, but it's very good against the pass. And I think that realistically what they saw there was Riley Moss is out, Levi Wallace is in, we're going to pick on this guy. And that showed up in the stat sheets because if you look at what Surtain did against Jerry Jeudy versus basically Levi Wallace, the bread and butter by a lot, not just the bread and butter, the bread, the butter, the meat, the lettuce of the sandwich all came against Levi Wallace. What came against Pat Surtain was just mayonnaise, mustard, any condiments that you would put on a sandwich like that. That was really it. So it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, inquiring minds want to know, is this an issue with Chubb going forward? Is the injury still nagging him, that ACL tear that he's come back from? Was it just, hey, we do just think we have a better shot if we air the ball out against this weakened Denver secondary that doesn't have Riley Moss? I'm intrigued. I would like to know. But from that in-division matchup, we'll go to another divisional matchup where we see the Titans hosting the Jaguars. And the Jaguars this week had some terrible news. They have placed Trevor Lawrence on injured reserve. That it absolutely sucks for the Jags because, they weren't really going anywhere. Yes, I guess technically they had a shot of being a divisional. I mean, realistically not, but like you don't want to have your franchise quarterback who you're paying millions of dollars to, and you just signed long term. You don't want to have him be ending the season on injured reserve, and you definitely don't want to be turning the control of the team to Mac Jones. Like, yeah, you brought in Mac Jones as the backup, but like no team wants to be having their backup playing meaningful football for the team in any way, shape, or form, and it's only week 14. I do say only week 14 because there's still 5 weeks left in the season. You could make the argument you don't that the Browns should have wanted their backup quarterback to be playing meaningful football from week 1, right? Because Jameis has just been doing the Lord's work when it comes to Browns football. But Trevor Lawrence is by far the better quarterback against Mac Jones. Like, if you're putting the two of them up against each other. That being said, on the flip side, the Titans, Levis has at least looked good. Like, he has looked capable enough to lead the team on different drives. The question is going to be the sustainability of it. And if you're the Titans, this is a great game for you to kind of see that, because you shouldn't be facing that much competition from the Jaguars offense. It sucks for any people who are BTJ fantasy holders. It sucks for people who, I mean, if you're a Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby drafter or holder in Dynasty, you kind of were very upset in general about this season. But Mac Jones doesn't help you improve in any way, shape, or form on the rest of the season, right? Like your outlook for the rest of the season isn't that great. So for the Titans, your defense, you at least get to, get better. You at least get to kind of put together and see what game plans can look like when you don't face a super high level of competition. And on the one hand, that's not that important, right? Because you want them to be working together when they're playing good competition. But on the flip side, you want to be able to know that you can really install a game plan and watch it work to fruition. And it's great to beat up against not good teams and kind of get that moment where you can kind of have a kumbaya moment, get the team together, and so on and so forth. So Chase is taking the Titans here. He's saying, can't see the Jaguars team winning another game. Bummer what happened to Lawrence. He looked solid before the hit. Levis is going to do what he does best. Yeah, it's a situation where I think the Levis train will continue, the Levis roller coaster ride. If you are a Titans fan, I feel sorry for you in the sense that this is not what you were hoping for the season. And you're looking forward to the draft to see what's going to happen there. You're looking forward to free agency. Maybe the Titans have to overspend to bring someone in because not at the quarterback position. I think they're going to continue to trust Will Levis, but to see what they can build around Levis to hide the mistakes. And you want to see another offseason. Will this guy continue to develop? Let's turn to one of the most lopsided games on paper, the Eagles versus the Panthers. Now, if Chase was here for comedic effect, I would try to come up with a way that we could argue that the Panthers could at least keep it close. I do think they could keep it close. They took the Chiefs to the limit, and whether the Chiefs are terrible or not, they are terrible. But whether the Chiefs are terrible or not, they are still a team that has capable players at different positions. And the Panthers have continued to do that because they took the Buccaneers to the limit. They forced overtime. Can they do that against the Eagles? I don't know. Does this also have the recipe to be a blowout? Yes, it does. Because Saquon Barkley, if you saw the FanDuel, and I think DraftKings, the lines for his rushing yards, it's I think like the fifth highest that they've had for a running back. I think it's over 100 yards rushing. So they're anticipating the Eagles destroying the Panthers. And if you're the Panthers, I mean, you kind of want to say, hey, everybody thinks we're going to lose. Let's fight. Let's fight, right? That being said, I don't think there's really a way for them to keep it that close. I think it's going to be it's going to be borderline blowout for this one. But like Eagles up by 2 scores, or like if it's a 21-38, a 17-point game, I think it'll be great for the Panthers. Like you continue to build, continue to try to work and see what you have with Bryce Young. He's continuing to improve. If you can have, even if you lose by 17 points, but you have mistake-free football, then ultimately it's a win because you know that you can continue to trust Bryce. You can continue to build and continue to work around and see what you can bring in. You know you're going to have a very high draft pick. It's a similar situation to the Titans. To nobody's surprise, Chase is taking the Eagles, saying Panthers will make it scrappy as Bryce does look much better, but the Eagles' overall talent will lead them to victory. And that takes us to one of the more intriguing games of the weekend. On the one hand, you have the Vikings. On the other hand, you have the Falcons. Now, if last week had not happened and it had been a decent Kirk Cousins game, you could argue, hey, this is going to be like a revenge game for Kirk. He's going to come back to Minnesota. He gets to take on his old team. He did a lot of great things with the Vikings over the years. They never really got over the hump, did they? But they were always fighting. They were always in contention. And now he's on the Falcons. He's got the Drake Londons of the world. He's got the Darnell Moonies. He's got the Bijans and the Tyler Algiers and the Kyle Pitts, who they don't want to use. But after he did do what he did last week, which was 4 interceptions against the Chargers, and now he has to face a Brian Flores defense, which granted, he knows, the defense all right, but like, this is a tough game. This is a tough game for the Falcons. I can understand why the line is the way it is, because they are still respecting Kirk and what he can do. Whether he can continue to do it, that's a question, especially after last week. This is an interesting one for me, simply because it on paper has the ability to be very high scoring. It also has the ability to be very low scoring, at least for the Vikings. I'm taking the Vikings simply because the Vikings are continuing to roll. They're continuing to win games, and they are, for whatever bad things that Sam Darnold has in his repertoire, they are finding ways to cover up those mistakes. And that's really what you need, right? That's what a good defense can do. And that's what a decent offense around the quarterback can do. And I say decent because Aaron Jones has kind of, like, yes, he made up for the fumble and the drop touchdown with a touchdown pass, but if they had the really strong ground game, the really, really strong, like if they had a Saquon or a Josh Jacobs or a Derrick Henry, then it's less of a concern because you can just run the ball a lot. And Aaron Jones is going to be interesting to watch for the rest of the season. I forget how many years they brought him in on, but I would not be surprised if the Vikings draft one of these running backs in the draft, and for when JJ McCarthy takes over this team. But let's look at what Chase is saying. The Vikings are finding ways to win, while Cousin, despite the revenge game factor against the Chargers, despite the revenge game factor last week against the Chargers, his throws didn't have any zip on them at all. The pick six to Tarheeb Still was one of the slowest balls intercepted all year. Cousins just looks bad right now. Yeah, like it's a situation where I think both of us are concerned about the future of Kirk Cousins in general, not just the rest of the season, but more of a in general thing, because the Falcons, they did draft Michael Penix Jr. that high, and they did it for Michael Penix that high. And they did it for a reason. And whether or not that was because they knew something about Kirk that the rest of us didn't, or obviously because they were able to have him go through a physical and all that kind of stuff, but they have the ability, similar to Denver, what Denver went through, they have the ability to cut bait. It'll be super fucking expensive. I mean, even if they wanted to bench him, like, you're tying up a lot of money with now your backup quarterback, but it is an option. Like, you have that as an option, and I'm interested to see the rest of the season. Similar to Aaron Jones on the Vikings side of things, I'm interested to see Kirk Cousins the rest of the season, how he continues to play, because he is now fighting to keep Michael Penix on the bench, which some people did not anticipate, but maybe the Falcons did. Maybe the Falcons knew a little something that the rest of us didn't. But let's turn to a divisional matchup. The Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, rolling, right? I mean, granted, they are rolling cold, or getting stopped cold in the weather of Lambeau Field, but they are rolling in general when it comes to their bounce back on the season. I don't think they're fully eliminated from playoff contention, but they need a lot of things to break in their favor for them to be anywhere near the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Jets, I think, also are technically not eliminated from the playoffs, but I don't know if anybody could really trust them at this point to go anywhere on a deep run. I do think it's interesting, though, that the Vikings are slightly less favored against the Falcons than the Dolphins are against the Jets, just with the amount of dysfunction that is going on the Jets side of things. But I think now the Dolphins, firmly entrenched in the warm southern Florida weather. I think they'll be back to business. I don't know what the Dolphins have to do to try to avoid the problems of what happened in Lambeau, because you're in the NFC. Like, I mean, at some point in time in the playoffs, you're more than likely gonna have to play up north. If Tua can't play Tua level football in cold weather, that's a problem. That's a problem that you have to figure a way around. And you need bruising power for that. Devon Achane, as good of a running back as he is not bruising power. And yes, they still have Raheem Mostert on the roster, but it's a 32-year-old Raheem Mostert. He's not going to be able to do that for sustained drives. He may be able to do it for one drive. Maybe he'll do it for two drives, but he can't do it really for the entire game. I don't know what the I forget. I think Jalen Wright is more of a speed back than he is of a power back. So the run game has to be able to help Tua long term for those cold weather games. Otherwise, what are the Dolphins doing? But let's look at what Chase picked here. Jets are the walking dead right now. Dolphins look good, but they just feel like they're missing something. Yeah, he's taking the Dolphins, but like I said, I think he and I are both in agreement there. He and I tend to think rather lockstep here and there. But yeah, it's it's an interesting situation. Let's turn to the Giants and the Saints. If I remember right, the Giants are stating that I think Drew is not playing. I think Drew Lock is not going to be playing for the Giants. Let me find out in a second. Or I think Tommy DeVito is not going to be. One of these two guys is not going to be playing. Yeah, no, Drew Lock is going to be playing because Tommy DeVito will not be playing. And that is it's tough to tell whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the Giants. Both of these quarterbacks have their issues. Both of these quarterbacks aren't as good as Daniel Jones, which is a weird sentence to say. But it kind of sucks because you have really dynamic rookies in Tyrone Tracy and Malik Neighbors that sort of are having their rookie season wasted. And to a certain extent, it's not that big of a deal because you want 6, 7, 8 years of Malik Neighbors and maybe 4 to 5 years of Tyrone Tracy before some of the hits just start to pile up on a running back. But you also don't want them to get discouraged. You also don't want the morale of the player to get so seriously affected that it can hamper their ability to play. And then we're talking about, if we could just get this person out of there, they would go back to their old form, right? Like that's a common thing that you hear sometimes but it can be a common refrain for a player, and it's just not something you want to see for somebody like Malik Neighbors, who has such promise, such a good player. You want to avoid that. Meanwhile, the Saints did drop the game. They did pick up that loss, but I can see a world where the Saints are able to put something together against the Giants. Alvin Kamara is still a good running back. The problem that I have with the Saints is who is catching these passes. I think Juwan Johnson picked up a little bit of an injury, but I think he also was cleared, I believe. Yeah, he's all clear. His foot was limited in Friday's practice, but does not carry an injury designation for Sunday's game. And really, that was one of the primary targets for Derek Carr. So as long as he's got him, Mason Tipton, Alvin Kamara as a receiver as well, I think the Saints have enough to be able to roll, because the Saints defense should be good enough to hold the Giants offense down. And Chase is taking the Saints because I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know why I bothered to look. He's got his sentence here is short, sweet, and it's to the point. Rizzy let me down last week, but I don't see back-to-back. And I'm picking them for different reasons, not their interim head coach, but that's That's it's a fun one there. Let's go from. We'll stay in the NFC, but we'll narrow our focus. We'll keep it in division, and we're talking about the NFC West with the Cardinals hosting the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are an intriguing team, I think would be the best way to put it, because they have so many pieces, but they are continually, it seems, being held back by quarterback play. That being said, they have ripped off 3 wins after their bye week. They beat the Niners, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Jets. Now that when they beat the Cardinals, it was a home game. Now they are traveling to Arizona, and so it's a little bit of a flip more here in favor of the Cardinals, getting that home field advantage. Can Seattle pull off what they did twice? Because that other game, or the first game, felt very fluky, right? You hold the Cardinals to 6 points, you score 16. There's turnovers in the game. It felt a little gimmicky. It felt a little fluky. Meanwhile, the Cardinals are a team that really don't know kind of what they're trying to be. Are they trying to be a running team? Are they trying to be a passing team? We say this every single week. I cannot tell what the Cardinals want to do. And I think until the Cardinals figure that out, it's going to be a little bit of a problem, because the Seahawks are trying to make sure that they win that division. Right now, they are the division leader at 7-5, but the rest of the division is so close. The Cardinals are 6-6. The Rams are 6-6. The Niners are 5-7, and the Niners don't look like they're going to be putting up that much of a fight, but it's still, there's still something there with the Niners, even with CMC and Jordan Mason going on IR. We'll be talking about that one very shortly, but it's a situation where you think that the Cardinals and the Seahawks, both of these teams, should be in more of a dogfight. Like, it should be more of a shootout. With the Cardinals also having a good receiving back in James Conner. Conner can do a little bit of everything, and so can K9. And I think this could either turn into a run fest where it's a slog between the tackles with these two guys, or we're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And I'm interested. What I'm going to be looking for here is how they want to use JSN, because they are a little wishy-washy with their usage of him. I think that last week kind of showed that to a certain extent, because they didn't target him that much in the beginning of the game, but then all of a sudden they kind of turned it on. Now, granted, that also was a weird game in general because of the number of turnovers that was happening. There was also that kickoff return for a touchdown. So it had its reasons to be gimmicky and fluky, but JSN ends the game with 4 targets. And the funny part is he has 4 catches. Meanwhile, you have DK Metcalf with 9 targets and 4 catches. So that the script of the Seahawks offense is we want to get a situation going where DK is getting these targets and getting these catches. But when push comes to shove now, it seems as though instead of trusting DK Metcalf to make the catch and make that sideline reception, they're going more for a middle of the field attack with JSN. And that can work it's similar to the Jameson Williams situation from last year, which I was talking about in the chat that Chase and I are a part of. What frustrated me about the Jameson Williams usage was you can't take those deep shots 4 to 5 times a game and then expect it to work, but also need to do these short intermediate passes, because when you take the deep shot, if it works, great. But if it doesn't, that defense is not going to adjust, because one deep throw a quarter, or not even deep throw, one target to Jameson Williams doesn't draw the coverage from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this year, with the departure of Josh Reynolds, but the addition of Tim Patrick, they are now sprinkling Tim Patrick in a bit more. But we saw that Jameson Williams moved away from being more of a deep threat and also more of an intermediate to deep threat route runner. And it's worked out pretty well. It's a similar situation here. You can't be taking 9 shots to DK Metcalf and 4 shots to JSN when JSN is, in essence, your second wide receiver. Like after him, so DK gets 9 targets, JSN gets 4 targets, Noah Fant gets 4 targets, and then it's a drop off from there. Tyler Lockett 3, AJ Barner 2, so on and so forth. It's a situation where Tyler Lockett's not long for this team. At his age, it just doesn't make sense. If JSN is going to be that second option, he can't be only getting 4 targets in a game, especially not when Geno's total number of throws is going to be 31. So we'll see how that goes. But for me, I think the Seahawks can take the win simply because they have a little bit better of firepower when it comes to throwing the ball and when it comes to who's going to make those catches. The question is going to be, can the Cardinals defense find a way to make the mistakes of Geno Smith and mean more and capitalize off of them? Because if they can do that, then it really doesn't matter how good of a runner K9 is. He's going to be a pass catching back because they're going to be moving from behind. They want to have those runs with K9, but in order to do that, Geno has to remain accurate. Looking at what Chase says, he's got NFC West implications, but I honestly flipped the coin. Both of these teams so inconsistent with everything, I couldn't decide which one. Seahawks were heads, so I went with them. And yeah, it's a weird one in that sense because what really are these teams' identities? It's not a situation where you have to have, this is a terrible running back. But we have great wide receivers. Like that's how you build the team. Or the flip side, we don't have the greatest wide receivers, but we have a really great running back that's going to be able to move the ball and then open up a few shots in the passing game. You can have both, and you can work with both. That's not the problem. The problem is moving back and forth between both of these strategies too often. And yes, it's a situation. Obviously, football is a situational thing. But sometimes your running backs need to take hits. They need to get into that rhythm. And having drives switch back and forth, this is going to be a passing drive. This is going to be a running drive. It's a little, not I don't want to say disorienting because like these are still grown adults and they should be like, okay, I got to run the ball. I got to run the ball. I got to catch the ball. I got to catch the ball. But at the same time, there is something for muscle memory. There is something for knowing, hey, this guy hits a certain way. There is something for knowing I break in on this route. Now this defender knows that. I need to know what he's going to do to change that up. Because if you're only taking 4 shots to JSN and there's very similar routes, then you don't know how that DB has been coached up to defend that route. And that's a situation where that guy can jump the ball and there's your Geno Smith interception. Right? Or you don't know with the run game, you don't know what going into the second half, you don't know what adjustments the defensive line coach has made to try to counter the runs that you're trying to do. So that's an interesting one to see. I mean, I'm saying that about a lot of them, but he and I are both in agreement to take the Seahawks. Let's move to the Niners and the Bears. So obviously the Bears did not do well on Thanksgiving. One thing had to give. Either the Bears losing streak was going to continue or the Detroit Lions losing streak on Thanksgiving was going to continue. And as it turned out, it was the Bears losing streak that continued. And after a 6-game skid, the Bears said, we've had enough. We are going to do something that has never been done in the 100-year history of this franchise. We are going to fire a coach midseason. And Eberflus was let go. Now, we can say that this is going to be the interim coach, the interim coach theory. They always pick up a win, right? or not always, but it seems to be more often than not that they pick up a win. We can say that this is going to be an issue with the Niners, with losing Christian McCaffrey for the season, losing Jordan Mason for the season. So now it's going to be Isaac Guerrero. It's going to be Patrick Taylor. They signed Israel Abanikanda from the Jets practice squad. That could be a reason. What I want to know, or what I want to see, is the Bears offense, because Thomas Brown was the offensive coordinator for a few games in Carolina. Then he gets brought on as an assistant to Shane Waldron, who is the offensive coordinator for the Bears. Then Shane Waldron gets fired, and Thomas Brown becomes the offensive coordinator for the Bears. Now Eberflus is fired, and Thomas Brown is the interim head coach for the Bears. When he interviewed for the job in spring of this year, probably, this was not on his bingo card for what the fuck was going to happen for his career. He is now the head coach of one of the oldest franchises in the history of the league. And there's a lot of pressure on him. But at the same time, he's playing with house money, because there's a reason why teams fire coaches. They're not doing that great. And once you fire a head coach, it's kind of like, well, if we do well, we do well. If we don't, we don't. And we're already looking to the next season. The Bears are not – we're still in this weird situation where teams are not fully eliminated from playoff contention. But, man, the Bears really got to pick things up if they want to try to be a wild card team, because right now the wild cards are the Vikings at 10-2, the Packers at 9-4, the Commanders at 8-5, the Bears are 4-8. Yes, if those three teams above start losing like crazy, then the Bears, if they win like crazy on paper, could become a 7 seed. It's possible, right? It's possible. Will it happen? The probability, very low. Absolutely very low. But in order for that to potentially happen, you've got to pick up a win here. It's just a situation where I can't trust the Niners, which is a weird thing to say. I can't trust the Niners, but I'm going to take the Bears more, not because of that interim head coach bounce. I'm taking the Bears because I think that Thomas Brown has done some great work in unlocking part of Caleb Williams' game. But the rest of these games are now an audition for him to potentially be the permanent head coach for the Bears. I think he's going to put his best foot forward. The Bears, both of these teams, just this is not the season that was anticipated by, not even by the fans, but by the majority of people watching football. It was not the season that was anticipated for either of these teams. Let's see what Chase picked for this. He did not have the order that I have, so I'm hunting around here. Here we go. Bears, new interim coach theory, plus the Niners might lose like 2 players this game or something weird will happen. The Niners are just beat up this year, and unlike in years past, don't have the depth to make up for the talent that they lost. Yeah, and it really sucks because I do like George Kittle as a player, as a person, and the window on George Kittle's career really is starting to close. And I don't know if he's going to get that Super Bowl ring. And he's had opportunities, which is the crazy part of this. He's had opportunities. It's just the Chiefs with their devil magic. But let's turn from this NFC versus NFC matchup to an AFC versus NFC matchup, where it is potentially involving one of the teams that could keep the devil worshiping Chiefs out of the Super Bowl, and that is the Bills. They will travel from Buffalo to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. This is a game that it's a crazy one in that sense that both of these teams had a lot of promise coming into the season. A lot of people didn't expect the Rams to go super crazy, but they expected them to be competitive, right? Like the Bills, yes, we kind of expected the Bills to kind of go super crazy. There were all those questions. Who is Josh Allen going to throw to, right? Like they did draft the rookie Keon Coleman, but who are they really going to be throwing to? But the Rams were expected to be competitive. They were expected to be competent. And the Rams start off with losing Puka Nacua in week 1. And then, or was it Puka or Cooper? They losing Cooper in week 1, and then week 2 losing Puka, and trying to find some combination of Jordan Whittington, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, some guys off the street almost, to win games. What combination of these 3 receivers and nebulousness can we put together to create a wide receiver core? They muddle through. They win some, they lose some. They win some, they lose some. They get Cooper back, then they get Puka back, and now it kind of seems as though we're back to business. But at the same time, Stafford is a year older, and some of these hits are starting to rack up. And it's weird because Stafford is still making really good decisions on where to get the ball, but it seems as though some of his arm strength is starting to be sapped away. Father Time being undefeated, it is what it is. But at the same time, he does make like 1 or 2 beautiful throws, beautiful deep shot throws every game that make you just go, yeah, it's still Matt Stafford. Like it's still Matt Stafford who's got like a cannon for an arm. But one thing that always works for the Rams is Kyren Williams. And Kyren Williams is one of the more unheralded running backs in the league. Doesn't get talked about a lot, doesn't get drafted super high if you're a fantasy player. Like maybe your league is a little bit different, so your mileage may vary, but generally speaking has been solid, dependable. Like yes, he's had a fumble here and there, but a solid, dependable running back who gets the job done. And for a lot of people, especially in fantasy, for a lot of people, he can be a league winner because of where you drafted him. Where you drafted him in relation to everybody else on your team, you're able to go, okay, if Kyren falls, I can get him in like round 3 or round 4. That frees me up to not have to reach in round 2. If you get him in round 4 or 5, then bless you, because I don't know how Kyren Williams would have fallen that low. But great running back. On the flip side, right now the Bills are firing on all cylinders. Josh Allen is fueled by the power of love. Completed the hat trick last week where he threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, and then somehow threw a touchdown that he has the reception for, because he throws it to Amari Cooper and then Amari Cooper laterals it to him. Completely was not the play design. People are tackling Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper just goes, "Here, Josh, you take the ball." And Josh goes, "Okay, I'll take the ball." And as it so happened, they were right by the goal line, and so he's able to dive into the end zone. But the power of love, congratulations on your engagement, sir, to Haley Steinfeld. The power of love powered Josh to a victory last week. And right now, the MVP, like, I don't know if he necessarily has it locked up. Lamar has kind of taken a step back, and the loss to the Eagles probably did not help the overall conversation. If you want, if like team wins and losses are going to be factoring into MVP, right? But if you want to say the most valuable player, right? Josh kind of put the team on his back and is responsible for, we'll say, 2.5 of the touchdowns, that half of a touchdown being the one that he threw because somebody did have to catch it. But the rushing touchdown, that's kind of on him. And the throw/reception touchdown, that's kind of on him. So he's got to be one of the front runners now. Has to be. Like, obviously he was before that game, but even more so. Like, yes, you got Saquon. Yes, you've got Derrick Henry, but Josh Allen's name has to be in that mix. I'm going to take the Bills because I'm a Josh Allen fan, and I like what they're doing a lot more. They're finding ways to do more with less. And if Keon Coleman takes that next step forward, if Khalil Shakir takes that next step forward, Dalton Kincaid, yes, he's got that injury, but he continues to improve. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to get over the hump. And that sounds crazy because it can only be one team out of 32 every year. And it sounds crazy because the Bills have continually fallen short in the playoffs. But every time that they fell short, outside of Stephon Diggs, they didn't have much. They really didn't have much. There's a reason why, even with Dawson Knox, they went and drafted Dalton Kincaid. There's a reason why, even with Stephon Diggs, they drafted Khalil Shakir, a very similar receiver. If you looked at what their measurables were, what Diggs's was coming out of the draft, what Shakir's were coming out of the draft, there's a reason why you're getting these people. And if those players can continue to develop and become better than the Gabe Davises of the world, then whoever you get to be that real prototypical wide receiver one, I think will be in a position to help that team get over the hump. They're close. They're very close. And they've got a date with one of these next two teams soon in the playoffs, I have a feeling. But of course, if the playoffs started today, that would require them to beat the Denver Broncos. And I don't know. But let's look at what Chase has here. Josh Allen's MVP to lose right now. Rams should play well against them, but the Bills, they're just firing on all cylinders. Yeah, we are a far cry from that Bills-Rams. Not Bills-Rams. This is the Bills-Rams. We are a far cry from that Bills-Texans game not too long ago, the Diggs sort of revenge game when the Bills came to town and Josh ended up with a stat line of like 9 completions on 30 attempts or some weird shit like that. But let's turn to Sunday night football. Oh, Sunday night. The Chiefs, the devil worshippers themselves, are going to be hosting the Chargers from Los Angeles. It's an AFC West showdown. It is the division leader, the conference leader, versus the, I believe, 8-5 Chargers. I believe they're 8-5. They have to be 8-5. But it is a game that I would say, like, if you're the Chargers, it's a must win. If you're the Chiefs, you can afford to lose this game by far. Like, you're still going to control the division at 11-2. You may have some issues with the 1 seed, but last year you proved that you could win on the road, though you're worse than you were last year. But I mean, you proved that you could, if we want to say that the Chiefs only care when it's the playoffs. But at the same time, you don't want to lose the game. That's I think that would be the best way to phrase it. It's a game that the Chiefs can lose, but why would you lose a game if you don't have to? The Chargers, however, it's a kind of a must win, because if the Chargers lose this one, then they run the risk of dropping in the wild card hunt. They're 8-4. That's it. I was like, the 8 number I knew was right. It was the number of losses. Because if they drop to 8-5, well, the Ravens, who are the 6th seed right now, they have the win over the Chargers. They have the tiebreaker. So the Ravens, who are 8-5 and on bye right now, they would become the new 5th seed. The Chargers would become the 6th seed. And the Broncos, who are 8-5, also, like, that is a neck and neck race. Now, in the Ravens and the Chargers' favor is the fact that Denver has lost to both of those teams. So Denver, in order to leapfrog the Ravens, they need to have 2 over the Ravens. To leapfrog the Chargers, they also need to have 2. However, the Chargers and Denver play each other in week 16, because week 15 Denver plays the Colts. So the Chargers, but you don't want to run that risk. If you're LA, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to beat this rookie Bo Nix and this Broncos defense who are really clicking. And granted, they did it once, so you could do it again. But you'd much rather be in a situation where you don't even need to think about it. So winning this game and going to 9-4 when Denver's 8-5, that's strong work for you. Right now, I think if the playoffs started today, you have the Chargers going to face the Texans. And I think if you're a Chargers fan, you would believe that the Chargers can beat the Texans, considering how the Texans have played as the season has continued. So who's going to take this one? I'm going to go with the Chiefs solely because I just don't want to count out the Chiefs' weird devil magic, especially when it's at home. The Chargers on paper are a way better team, though. Like, there's just no, and maybe this is what what they needed. Like last time, Derwin James wasn't playing. This time he will. I believe he will be playing. I haven't seen any injuries or anything like that. There it is. That's it. The question is Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey's status for this week, that is up in the air. I don't know if he remains limited on Thursday. McConkey's question is he is considered questionable for the game against Kansas City. If he doesn't play, it could turn into a Chiefs win very, very easily. But let's turn to Chase, our Chiefs and Chargers fan, or not Chiefs and Chargers, our Chargers fan, and see what he believes for Chiefs and Chargers. He, of course, no shocker there, is taking the Chargers. He's saying, I believe in Jim beating the devil magic with some of his weird juju. I appreciate the faith for him there. And that brings us to Monday Night Football. It's the Cowboys. It's the Bengals. If this had been week 1, people would have been excited for this game, but it's not week 1. Will be by then the close of week 14, and it's going to be a situation where Dak Prescott isn't playing. You've got Cooper Rush as your starting quarterback. I think CeeDee Lamb also is questionable for this game. He expects to play, but he is not a full guarantee. Well, I have a feeling he will be playing though. But the thing is, you would say, oh, John or Chase, if Chase were here, why are we even bothering to talk about this? Cooper Rush, like, what do we? The Bengals continue to find ways to lose fucking games. How they pull this off, I don't know. It's a reverse devil magic of the Chiefs. where something happens that causes the Chiefs to win, something happens that causes the Bengals to lose. They have scored like 30 something points in a lot of games, 30 plus points in multiple games, and they still have lost a lot of those games. And how that keeps happening, I have no idea. So, yeah, like they score 33 against the Commanders, lose. They score 38 against the Ravens, lose. They score 34 against the Ravens, lose. They score 38 against Pittsburgh, lose. Does not make any sense. I hope I'm picking the Bengals only because I am hoping that they don't, like, if the Bengals lose this game, I think Joe Burrow starts shooting people on the team, the staff, not the players, but like I think he just starts shooting people and try to figure out what needs to happen, what changes need to get made. Well, maybe it's this guy doesn't no longer need to be here. Let's replace him. I can't get them to fire people. But if that person is no longer around and is no longer alive, then hey, they got to replace him at that point. I fear for Joe Burrow's mental sanity. I fear for Jamar Chase's mental sanity if the Bengals don't win this game. really hope they do. Um, let's see. What does Chase have for this one? He is taking the Cowboys. Oh my God. No compassion for the Bengals. My goodness. He says, I expect this to be a vintage Bengals great Joe Burrow performance. This defense, though, is dreadful. And I expect a big upset and the Bengals playoff dreams being dead after this week. Terrible. But it is what it is. But guys, these have been our picks for this week's week 14. Chase gave me his picks beforehand. You've got my picks. Very, very similar on a lot of these. Only towards the end did he and I kind of change up what we picked. But let us know in the comments how you think about these picks. We'll be back to discuss all of our all of our selections. Junior Junio, thank you for joining us. 34-30 Bengals. Yeah, it's just like I think the Bengals need some kind of good news, like just something. It's been a terrible season, and they cannot seem to figure it out. If Lou Anarumo is still with the team after the end of this season, boy howdy, they like I don't know what the Bengals management and ownership are doing because there's got to be a better defensive coordinator out there. There just really, really does. But until next time, guys, we want to thank you for tuning in. As always, remember, take care of yourselves and each other. We will catch you all next time, and we will see you later.